What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right. That's right. For everyone who's tuning in, we thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. We thank you for subscribing to Behind the Bench and help making this show the best that it can be. And we're just going to continue to talk sports, hopefully at the highest level possible, and to be as objective as possible while always attempting to uphold the history of the game. Now, NBA, as the playoffs are set to start this weekend. And this is particularly for not just NBA fans, but specifically for fans of the Los Angeles Lakers. I ask that, as a fellow fan of this franchise for a very, very long time, decades upon decades upon decades upon decades. When you try to explain and try to highlight the talent that we had drafted starting out, it was second to none. See, looking back on it, it may be difficult to reach that conclusion. Problem was, they was not allowed the ample time to meet their potential as players and do that together as a team. But we see the benefits, and we have seen the benefits, and we have seen countless examples of what happens when you allow the team to grow and develop. When you see a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who 4 years ago, after playing in the bubble tournament back in 2020, OKC and his front office began the process of starting all over again. So they traded their top players, Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Victor Oladipo, and the like. And they acquired draft pick after draft pick after draft pick after draft pick. And the so-called experts in the nays and the says said, what is OKC doing? They out of their mind. You got to have players in uniforms. You can't put draft picks in uniforms. But their front office was undeterred and did not listen to the influence of talking heads. Now look at them in 2024. Not only did they achieve a winning record this year, not only did they win 50 games this year, but they finished with the number one seed. They clinched the number one seed in the Western Conference, which is darn hard to do, and became the youngest team ever to clinch the number one seed in the West. Minnesota Timberwolves finished a game behind in the Western standings and finished with the third seed in the West. The Denver Nuggets, who spent the past 5-6 years building around their nucleus of young players, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. And along the way, they had good players such as Harris Barton Jr. and Gary Harris. They win a championship. They lose 2 players to free agency. They didn't sign on one in free agency. But the Denver Nuggets won 4 more games than they did last year when they won their first championship in franchise history. Let me repeat that. They lost 2 players to free agency. They didn't sign anyone in free agency. But you know how they improved? Well, internally, continuity, and they drafted in young talent. Peyton Watson and last year Christian Braun. Now he's a second-year player. That's how you build a team. That's how you sustain a team. That's how potential dynasties are created and formed. See, there are no shortcuts to winning long term. None. So what I'm getting at is, and you have other teams in the Western Conference who have improved. Houston Rockets. You know the San Antonio Spurs are going to improve after witnessing the potential of Victor Wembanyama, the rookie sensation, who will more than likely win Rookie of the Year. The New Orleans Pelicans improved by 7 games from last year. They improved by 13 games from 2 years ago. So their progression is a little more incremental. It's incrementally done, but nonetheless they're improving. The Sacramento Kings, they slipped a little bit this year, but I believe a lot of that has to do with injuries to Malik Monk and who's their sixth man, and then Kevin Herter, who's their starting, if I'm not mistaken, the starting small forward. I believe he played small forward on that team. Okay. So I love setting up backdrops to begin, what I like to expound on. So I asked Laker fans, do they really think that those young men, that young core, the original young core, weren't any good? Well, guess what? They are meeting the projections that I concluded they can reach as they continue establishing a career after they were, let's just say, forced off the team by you know who. As it turns out, one, Ivica Zubac, who was drafted in 2016 along with Brandon Ingram, who's now representing the New Orleans Pelican franchise. Ivica Zubac was a prospect, right? That's the type of player where you have to develop him. He had an abundance of skill, footwork, and intuition around the basket. Instinct, I meant to say instinct, not intuition, but instinct. So, in his third season, when the Lakers were forced to change directions, or led to change directions from building on a tremendous future, establishing a tremendous future, to going all in and eventually throwing all your chips in the middle of the table. Well, Ivica Zubac was sacrificed and was traded to the Los Angeles Clippers. Of all teams, the Los Angeles Clippers. And when he was traded, he was undervalued. He was said to be a bust. Said to be of no real contribution to a team's success in terms of, winning or having a winning record, or becoming a playoff contender or whatnot. So since his tenure with the Los Angeles Clippers, I believe that he's been underappreciated and underutilized because he was never developed. See, Nikola Jokic was developed. And look what he has turned himself into. And look what he's become. Look what he achieved last year and the 2 years prior when he won back-to-back league MVP. He was developed. And he was drafted in the second round. See what I'm getting at? The one thing that I do believe that has improved in the NBA, or I put it this way, I won't say improved, but became more of an emphasis is development of young talent. Because the NBA in the 70s, let's just say since the merger, now let's say from the time the NBA-ABA merger took place in 1976 up until the 90s, the 1990s, the NBA did not draft high school players. And you were expected and you was required to complete at least on average 3 years of college before entering pro. Now today's revisionists will say, well, that proves that those players were not as good. Now what it shows is that there was no shortcuts taken. And that they had to develop from prep athletes to adult young men. That 3-year period is vital. So when Zubac was drafted, he was 17, going on 18 years old. And when you watched him work out, you said, wow, he's like a diamond in the rough. You just have to polish him up. I said, man, by the time he reaches his, let's say, 5th year in the league, I could see him averaging 20 points a game and averaging double-digit rebounds and be a really good defender of the paint. And what's crazy about all this is, I want fans to really peep this. Since Zubac was traded to the Clippers in the middle of the 2018-2019 season, the Los Angeles Lakers have not been able to solidify their position since he was traded. And the center position has been the staple of the franchise. That's the irony of it. So they've had Dwight Howard back twice. Well, playing for the Lakers 2 times on 2 occasions since all this started. Andre Drummond. He was supposed to have been, getting him was going to be the long-term solution. He was gone within 4 months. Mo Bamba was gone and played 1/2 of basketball for this franchise before he was let go. And now he's the backup center in Philadelphia for Joel Embiid. DeAndre Jordan during the 21-22 season. He didn't really get a lot of playing time. He was gone after 1 year. Matter of fact, by the second half of this season, you barely saw him on the court. They've had undersized players trying to masquerade as centers. Wayman Gabriel. I believe he's now with the Boston Celtics now. Damian Jones, who I believe came up through the G League, and he had 2 different stints with the Lakers over the past 3 years. And I believe now, he was this, I know he was from the Sacramento Kings, and I believe he's playing for an Eastern Conference team. But nonetheless, it's almost like he disappeared. So, who else they brought up in? They brought back Thomas Bryant, an original drafted player from the Lakers in 2017. But they have yet to solidify that position in 5 seasons. When Shaq got traded to the Miami Heat in 2004, they drafted a young Andrew Bynum, the youngest player ever drafted into the NBA, as a matter of fact. And by year 3, he became the team's starting center. And Zubac has been underappreciated, underutilized, and he's being asked, I believe, on defense to cover for the defensive mishaps by the star players. If you really watch the Clippers games, I believe that's what's going on. Now, the reason I'm bringing up his name is these are the top quote unquote rim protectors of the NBA this year. In terms of what they allow on defense against the opponent when it comes to field goal percentage. How often or how successful are they scoring on Zubac when he's in the game defending the paint? Now look at all these names now. Jared Allen, who's a very good young center in this league. Yusef Nurkic, a veteran center in this league, solid. Giannis Antetokounmpo, two-time league MVP, arguably still the most dominant two-way player in the NBA, or at least let's just say prior to this year. Rudy Gobert, three-time defensive player of the year. Anthony Davis, right? The generational talent. Many people say talent-wise he could be a top 5 player, right? Jaren Jackson, last year's defensive player of the year. Nick Claxton, this quote-unquote ideal type of center for today's NBA. Isaiah Hartenstein for the New York Knicks, who just clinched the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference yesterday. Rookie sensation Victor Wembanyama. Brook Lopez, who helped Milwaukee win the championship in 2021. He's been with Milwaukee ever since he was let go by the Lakers in 2018. After the 2018 season, he's been with Milwaukee, I believe, let's just say about 6-7 seasons. Joel Embiid, last year's league MVP. Kristaps Porzingis, a very talented, he's more like a combo 4 or 5. You know, he plays like a 4, but technically he's playing the 5 spot in Boston. And I believe Boston won how many games this year in the regular season? 62 games, I believe, 62, 63 games. Clinched home court throughout the playoff. Walker Kessler, very talented young big man, second year this year. He's one of the top rookies in the NBA last year. I think he's had been dealing with injuries throughout the course of this year for the Utah Jazz. Number 2, Chet Holmgren. Number 2 pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder in the 2022 NBA draft. And he's at number 2. Look who's at number 1. Look who's at number 1. Ivica Zubac. Now check this out. Imagine if he was really allowed to establish himself at that center position and really developed as a player. See, I don't think his potential's really been tapped into. He's being used as just a rim protector, but I believe he's more than that. I believe he would be more exceptional on defense than he is now, and on offense if he had never been traded by the Lakers and allowed to develop there. What the Lakers have been missing for the past 5 years, they traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, the city rival. It's astounding, man. It's mind-boggling. But Laker fans have been told that that young core wasn't no good. When he's featured in the Clippers offense, their defense functions properly. Right? And they play up to their potential. Now check this out. And I'm just going to briefly touch on the original young core. So potentially, if the Lakers would have stayed the course, let's think about this now. You would have had the top, but by way of shooting percentage wise, limited shooting percentage, you could have had the top so-called rim protector, defender of the paint in the NBA. Because he's doing it for the Clippers while being underutilized. You drafted a player who's one of the top 3 best mid-range shooters in basketball, only behind veteran players like Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan, who's well on the other side of 30. Brandon Ingram, 26 years old. So imagine him when he starts entering his prime. He could become known as the best mid-range scorer in the NBA. So we gave up, when it comes to mid-range game, of all players who, specialize in that area of space on the court on offense, on the front end of being 30 years old, he's the best mid-range shooter in the NBA. We gave up the best defender of the paint per metric, per shooting percentage in the NBA. We gave up a player who became the first player since Larry Bird to average 24, 10, and 6, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, while shooting 80% from the free throw line and 40% from 3. And he didn't have when he did it, I'm talking about Julius Randle, this is like 3 years before they brought in Jalen Brunson, who's playing lights out, man. I love what Jalen Brunson's doing. This is before they brought in OJ Odonobi. This is when R.J. Barrett was just drafted. Now he's playing for the Toronto Raptors. He did that. First player since Larry Bird in the 80s. That's Julius Randle. So all these, thresholds and distinctions, high-level distinctions that young core is reaching, while having to reestablish themselves on teams that were struggling way before they got there. Josh Hart. I'm not making none of this up. Pound for pound, metric and statistically, at his height, I believe Josh Hart is like 6. He may be 6'5". We'll just say 6'4.5". But I'll round out, say 6'5". He's the best pound for pound rebounder in the NBA. That was the scouting report when the Lakers drafted him in 2017. So we gave that up. We gave up essentially a player whose style is a template of Larry Bird. For all players under 30 who excels at the mid-range, we gave up the best mid-range shooter in basketball. A wing who can play either the 2 or the 3 spot, 2 guard or the small forward. And Brandon Ingram broke the record for free throw shooting percentage increase from one year to the next. He had the highest increase ever in NBA history. Because when he was with the Lakers, he was shooting around 66, 67%. A lot of young players do that. A lot of wing players start off shooting around that point. And then the shooting instructor for the New Orleans Pelicans corrected his shooting for him. He jumped from 66, 67% to 87, 88%. That's the highest jump in free throw shooting percentage in the history of the NBA. The second highest is Lonzo Ball, who was shooting like less than 50%, which is bad. That's bad. But he had that unorthodox shooting for him because he was rushing to the NBA. But he had all the raw talent. So he goes from shooting 50% to, by the time he left the Pelicans and signed with the Chicago Bulls, he was shooting 80%. His three-point shooting improved to 40% plus. So he's shooting like, in terms of, I ain't talking about frequency, I'm just talking about shooting percentage. Now he's like hitting like Steph Curry levels. Lonzo Ball, with his tremendous court vision, as a rookie, he averaged more assists and more rebounds than De'Aaron Fox, averaged more steals on the defensive end than De'Aaron Fox, and only averaged a half a point less than De'Aaron Fox did during his rookie year. Wow. And this is before Lonzo corrected that shot. Lonzo Ball, his first 3 months with the Chicago Bulls, helped propel them to number one seed, to first place in the East before he suffered that knee injury, which stemmed from those shoes he was wearing. Had been wearing all them years that put it led to a lot of friction on his knees. It stemmed from that. But that's a whole nother story. But what I'm trying to say is Lonzo Ball was becoming the league's first ever 3-and-D point guard. Like, he could shoot 40% from three, but play lockdown defense. Because he was playing great defense as a rookie. And he kept his turnovers to a minimum as a rookie. So we gave up the league's first ever 3-and-D point guard, and word is he's on his way back. We gave up the best young mid-range shooter in basketball. We gave up a player whose template is a reflection of Larry Bird. We gave up who is now the best defender of the paint statistically in the NBA. The pound for pound best rebounder in the NBA. We gave up the only original Laker to ever win Sixth Man of the Year in the NBA in Jordan Clarkson, who had that shooter's mentality, like, I'm going to shoot. I'm going to put pressure on you, and they may not go down, but I'm going to put constant pressure on you. And he helped the Utah Jazz clinch the number one seed in the Western Conference in 2021 when his star player, Donovan Mitchell, missed the last month and a half of the regular season due to a severe ankle sprain. It was Jordan Clarkson's play, not just scoring-wise, but playmaking, as his game evolved, to clinch the number one seed. So we gave up the only original Laker to ever win Sixth Man of the Year. We gave up a player who became the best sixth man in the world. Okay, let me take it further. We gave up a player after being traded to the Washington Wizards, hit 10 game-winning shots for that franchise that he had no business playing for over the course of 2 years. He was so much of a threat and feared at the end of games that his star player, his best player, the quote-unquote face of that franchise over the course of the previous 4 years, Bradley Beal, deferred to Kuzma, who had just joined that team. Kuzma is the first six-man level player who I ever saw of all the great six men we've seen, from, as far as being scorers, like Vinnie Johnson to now Vinnie Johnson did hit a game winner to help Detroit clinch that second straight championship versus Portland in 1990. He did do that. But Jamal Crawford, Jason Terry, Montrezl Harrell. I mean, it's been all kind of, great six men over the years. Kevin McHale, people that ilk. Bobby Jones, the Secretary of Defense. I'm trying to think of some other great six men out there. Michael Cooper for the Los Angeles Lakers. Bill Walton, when he played six-man role for the Boston Celtics in 86. Tony Kukoc of the 96, 97, 98 Chicago Bulls. I'm just throwing some names out there, and I know I'm missing some people I can't think of right now, but Kyle Kuzma was the first six-man level player I've ever seen in my life watching basketball who had a superstar mentality at the end of games. The first one. 10 game-winning shots for the Washington Wizards in 2 years. That's why they offered him a $100 million contract. Because Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis deferred to Kyle Kuzma because he had the knack for hitting a big shot. And every time I saw him take that big shot, I felt confident that he was going to hit that shot. Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso, as a reserve player, not this year, but last year, the first half of the season, he was leading the league in steals per game. He's a defensive specialist and can shoot the three. He was leading the league in steals before a dirty play by an opposing player. I believe that's when the Bulls played the Milwaukee Bucks. And he suffered a broken hand and he missed like 2 months. That man could have led the league in steals as a reserve. Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant was a stretch five in college. Played 1 year at the University of Indiana, and I watched him play about 6 or 7 times. He was shooting 40% from three in college. And he's not even getting any playing time in Miami. He's been undervalued. You know why he was undervalued? Because he was undervalued in his second stint with the Lakers. He gets traded. And see, when you're undervalued when you're young and you start getting traded off like that, well, it's like you're being passed down from one team to the next. That's what happened to Andrew Wiggins. We never seen a number one pick, a player chosen number one selection in the NBA draft, get traded. Imagine if he would have been allowed to play for the team who drafted him. Maybe he's a different type of player today. But nonetheless, once he joined the team that utilized his strengths, he helped the team win a championship. Golden State Warriors. Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner is contributing to what Orlando is doing and clinching a playoff berth for the first time. I'm talking about a legitimate playoff berth. I ain't talking about like as a number 8 seed, which I mean, you're still a playoff team as an 8 seed. But I'm talking about where you can say Orlando Magic may be a force in the future. He's helping them win games as a high-level reserve. In college, University of Michigan, he led that team as a at-large bid team to a national title game, only to lose to, I believe, in 2018, I believe that was North Carolina that they had to play in that title game. North Carolina, or maybe it was no, I don't think it was Villanova, because Villanova won the year before. I think it may have been North Carolina. But nonetheless, do Laker fans understand what I'm trying to say? They're all reaching benchmarks, man. They're setting marks in this league. Kyle Kuzma made a statement. Entering his third year with the Lakers, he said, I never dreamed that we would get rid of all this young talent. I believe we had a future dynasty. So when you look at what Ivica Zubac is doing, even when he's being underutilized, imagine what he would be doing if he had been developed. You're talking about in this league where it's been difficult to uh, uh, establish like a bevy of talented, like high level centers or all-star level centers who can average 20 and 10. Well, Zubac had that potential. He still has it. But he had to be developed. You have to give him the ball. He's a traditional back to the basket center. With enough touches, with his touch around the basket, and the more practice you get with it, the better you're going to get. We gave up a 20 and 10 center. We gave up a stretch 5 center. Ivica Zubac is the best rim protector in the NBA. Do the fans understand what I'm trying to say? They gave up a future championship squad. This is before you even talk about bringing in a star free agent. See, if they were to play their cards right, everything. Matter of fact, they didn't have to play no cards. They didn't have to show their hand. They didn't have to, try to trick no one with by exhibiting a poker face. All they had to do is let the cards play out. They gave up the best young core that we've ever seen in the history of this league under the one and done system. That's what they gave up. Everything I just laid out is factual and is true, and it can be verified through research. But to this day, 5 years later, even after they brought in, Jackson Hayes from the New Orleans Pelicans, they brought in Christian Wood. Christian Wood ain't played in about 2 months. They could not solidify the center position. They done had about 15 or 20 players play that position, and they still can't solidify. It's because they drafted their future center back in 2016, but they traded him to the arch rival, the city arch rival. I've never seen nothing like this before, man. And when you try to point this out, it gets overlooked, it gets scoffed at. But the reality is the Lakers scouting department did such a tremendous revolutionary job in drafting that young talent. We'll never see young talent come through the pipe like that again. And if we do, it's going to be about 25, 30 years from now. That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And that's why I've held on to this for so long. Because they're meeting all the projections. All of them. Imagine what they'd be doing together. And then you still got players like Austin Reeves undrafted. He can play. Austin Reeves can play. He can play. And you keep all your draft picks and you steady drafting in talent. The Lakers would have been beyond dominant. They could have became dynastic. But in order to see that go through, you have to believe it. If you forego that and exempt that, what you're really saying is you don't believe, and that you feel that you have to throw all your chips in and go in desperation mode. See, and ultimately what happens is you wind up selling yourself short. And you're scrambling. When you had they was blessed with everything. See, and Ivica Zubac, who will never get the fanfare. It's not going to be mentioned. He is the best defender of the paint in the NBA. And he's being asked to cover for the defensive miscues by the star players. And it puts him out of position and it makes him look bad. But on his real team, building that chemistry with his real teammates, the Los Angeles Lakers would have been second to none. So I just want to drop that. Kudos to Ivica Zubac. And until next time, this is JB for BTB. Behind the Bench.